Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're doing something really important. We're taking a close, documentary-style look at a profound chapter in modern history. We're going to explore the systematic cultural erasure that took place before and after the Sri Lankan Civil War, and the absolutely remarkable indigenous pathways to healing that have emerged since. This is a sober look at human rights, how legislation can be weaponized, and the enduring resilience of collective memory. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll start at the Palace of Knowledge, examine the legal roots of discrimination, look at the Night of the Fire, explore inherited trauma, and finally, analyze indigenous paths to peace.
Section 1. The Palace of Knowledge, the intellectual heart of Tamil identity.
To really understand the gravity of what was lost, just listen to this eyewitness account. They had torched the elegant palace of white rooms. 90,000 volumes gone, some of them original in single copies. Our past, the future, and it was gone. When you read that, it really hits you, right? This wasn't merely property damage. To the community, it was the literal incineration of their past and their future. Now, looking at this majestic neo-Mughal architecture, what's truly amazing is that this started back in 1933 as just a modest private collection. It grew entirely through community effort and public donations. By the time it opened in 1959, it had democratized learning and become the absolute center for Tamil intellectuals in an area where education was basically the only pathway to professional survival.
97,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many books, rare manuscripts, and irreplaceable historical documents were housed there by 1981. It was literally one of the largest libraries in all of Asia, a massive testament to cultural preservation.
Section 2. Institutionalizing ethnic discrimination, the legislative roots of conflict. You see, the destruction of the library didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was preceded by decades of systemic shifts. Look at this timeline. In 1948, the Ceylon Citizenship Act effectively stripped over 1 million Indian Tamils of their voting rights. Then, fast forward to 1956, the Sinhala Only Act makes Sinhala the sole official language. This deliberate cascade of legislation isolated Tamil speakers, culminating in the massive political unrest of 1981.
So what did this mean on the ground? It was legalized marginalization. Tamil speakers were suddenly excluded from civil service and higher education. Human rights observers are quick to point out that this directly violated the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It wasn't an accident. It was an institutionalized strategy to consolidate majoritarian nationalism and create second-class citizens.
Section 3. Biblioclasm and Cultural Erasure, the Night of the Fire.
This contrast right here is just devastating. On the left, the library in all its glory. On the right, hollowed out, burnt concrete. We have to frame this strictly through the lens of biblioclasm, the deliberate destruction of cultural heritage. It wasn't just a fire, it was the violent removal of a community's intellectual footprint from the physical landscape.
The historical records from the night of May 31, 1981, are chilling. An organized mob, which reportedly included state police brought in by cabinet ministers, deliberately set the library ablaze. It burned for 2 whole nights. And the government's initial reaction? They deflected blame, claiming it was just drunken looters. Human rights organizations argue that this deflection contributed heavily to a horrible climate of impunity.
When we break down what was actually lost, you realize how methodical this was. The fire consumed the only original copy of the Yalpanivaipa, the primary chronicle of Jaffna's ancient history. The private archives of global scholars, gone. Centuries-old palm leaf manuscripts of indigenous medical traditions, up in smoke. This was a highly targeted strike at the very core of Tamil intellectual identity.
Looking at this damaged statue standing in front of the burnt shell, it perfectly illustrates what human rights observers have been saying all along. Destroying physical landmarks like this is a calculated mechanism. It's about severing a people's connection to their history and destroying their collective memory. Ultimately, preserving culture is a fight for human dignity.
Section 4. Inherited Trauma and Identity, the Psychological Aftermath.
The physical flames were eventually put out, but the psychological ones kept burning. Researchers capturing war-related trauma documented this absolutely haunting sentiment from survivors. We are all alive but dead. Trauma in this context isn't just an individual issue, it's a collective, inherited condition. That profound psychological desolation still deeply affects the community's capacity for reconciliation today.
And this trauma is actively compounded by an ongoing architecture of erasure.
We're talking widespread forced displacement, literally wiping the Tamil presence off the map through land appropriation and the renaming of towns. The state prohibited memorializing fallen civilians, physically bulldozing memory spaces like the heroes' rest cemeteries. It's quite literally spatial engineering designed to erase a culture geographically.
Section 5. Indigenous Paths to Peace, Healing a Fragmented Society.
So how do you even begin to heal from that level of fragmentation? Well, communities aren't just relying on Western clinical models, they're turning to indigenous healing. To counter that collective feeling of being alive but dead, they are applying deep spiritual concepts. Ideas like Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the belief that the whole world is one family, alongside the principles of ahimsa, which is nonviolence, and metta, or loving kindness.
And these aren't just abstract ideas. They are incredibly active frameworks being used right now. We're seeing Hindu practices of yoga and selfless service, along with Buddhist community-centered rituals, fostering genuine inner transformation. Groups like the National Shura Council are out there actively building interfaith dialogue. It's amazing how these traditional approaches are being seamlessly integrated with formal mental health support to bridge the gap between individual recovery and societal peace-building.
But here's a detail I absolutely love. Out of the intense trauma of the 1981 library fire came the Nullaham Foundation. It's a massive open-access digitization project. It serves as a defiant repository of Tamil knowledge, making sure that the community's intellectual heritage is mirrored globally. Basically, they're guaranteeing that it can never, ever be physically destroyed again.
We've covered a lot today. We've seen how legal frameworks can be weaponized, how cultural landmarks can be turned to ash, and the heavy weight of inherited trauma. But we've also seen the unbreakable nature of human dignity and the beautiful, spiritual ways communities rebuild. So, based on all the evidence we've explored, I want to leave you with this. When a community digitizes its soul and builds peace from its own roots, can destroying their past ever truly erase their future? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.